Good morning or good afternoon or good evening whenever you're listening to this podcast. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Hope you ate too much, got a little tryptophan nap, enjoyed the football, all of that.
Hey, honestly, I hope we had a good Thanksgiving because we don't know at this point.
It's a good point. We may not even be here on Thanksgiving on this planet for all we know. God willing and the creek don't rise, we are, but we are taping this podcast so we could spend a little bit of time with our family but still give you quality programming for you people that wanted to sneak away for a little bit and, before your Egg Bowl telecast, have a chance to listen to the best podcast in the state of Florida regarding sports right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. So, got this game coming up on Sunday. We talked about it a lot this week, and if you missed the program, you can go back and see some of the podcasts that we've had. But I think it boils down to this: is there's a couple things that are going to be sort of the headlines on Monday, if you will, and that is who played quarterback. Did Baker go as expected? And when I say as expected, they're going to kind of leave it up to him in terms of the pain management part of things. If he feels like he can get through the game, not do anything significantly to re-injure his shoulder, he will be the starter, although Teddy Bridgewater has taken the majority of the reps with the first team throughout the week. So he now has his own game plan tailored to his skill set, and he's ready to go from the first snap if necessary. And that's obviously going to be the biggest storyline of the game as far as the Bucs go. That and the addition of, can their defense kind of finally stop the bleeding? It's a team game, and obviously when you don't score and you don't sustain drives and that sort of thing, you put your defense back on the field too much. But too often during that 3-game losing streak, they gave up huge splash plays. And it's not all 11 guys, but that's never the case with defense. It's one guy out of position here, one guy there. And I heard this a lot this week about this team sort of holding each other accountable. Levante David made another speech after the game, and he's still not a guy that talks a lot. But he basically said, you have to decide not just what kind of team we're going to be, but what kind of player are you? Are you a guy that's dependable? Are you going to do the things you're supposed to do at the right times and be in position to make plays and, and not be that guy that gets your team, hung out to dry? And I think that's resonated a little bit, in that locker room. I think the chance of Hassan Reddick coming back, and we won't know that probably till game time, is certainly would be a big, acquisition for them to help them rush the passer, because what's happening is when they do cover well, they don't get any pressure on the quarterback, or when they don't cover and they have pressure on the quarterback, there's guys that are wide open. So either way, they got to find a way to make life difficult for Jacoby Brissett. He is a quality quarterback. I've always thought this guy could start in the league. He's played a lot of football, former Gator. He has beaten the Bucs before, beat Tom Brady in Cleveland, as a matter of fact. Completes a high volume of passes, unlike some quarterbacks like this guy. I think he set an NFL record just a couple weeks ago with like 48 completions or something, like threw it 70 times. So he's gonna make plays. They have a killer tight end. Their defense is unorthodox at times. They do some exotic type looks and blitzes and things like that, but they're still very capable of getting turnovers. They've been in some really close games. They just haven't finished on top of the scoreboard. But look, they're traveling east. They're playing at 1:00. You've got them at your place. You need to stop the 3-game losing streak and to have a 3-8 team coming in here. This is an opportunity for the Bucs to get their season back on track. You win this game, you're 7-5. You were fortunate that Carolina lost on Monday night to the San Francisco 49ers. Now Carolina on Sunday, in a short week, they get to host the LA Rams. And everybody knows, especially the Bucs, how good the LA Rams are. Even though they won't be at home, that's going to be a tremendous battle for the Carolina Panthers to get that one. So, beat the Cardinals. Really, the way it comes down to, from a math standpoint, that even if you just do these things, if you beat the Cardinals, beat Atlanta on a Thursday night, and win one of the Carolina games, say the one up there, no team can catch you in the NFC South. If you can go 3-3, if you have wins over Carolina and Atlanta, and you're guaranteed to win the division. So They still control their own destiny. They're aware of that. They just got to start playing better, and you've got to get a win. If you get a win, you feel like you're back on track, and all things are possible. So we'll see if they're able to do that. We've got your mailbag questions coming up, so let's go ahead and hammer those out as we end the week.
All right, we'll start with Alejandro, who tweeted. He says, it's not for lack of trying, but how much is not having a pass rush affecting this defense? If they make the playoffs and the defense doesn't do good, does Jason Light make a trade next year for a proven pass rusher, like the Micah Parsons trade?
I mean, it's a great question. I think it's the biggest failure on this defense overall is the lack or the inability to get consistent pressure using your front four. Obviously, and I've looked this up, like every year that Todd Bowles has been here, his teams are going to get between 40 and 50 sacks, right? And even the years where, maybe that their top, and this has happened a couple of times where the guy that led the team in sacks had 7 or 7.5. No one's had double digits since Shaq Barrett, for God's sakes. And that's been several years ago. So even in those years, they still have 45 to 50 sacks because he has, but he has to do it by, bringing safeties down and blitzing, by double A gap blitzes with the linebackers, exotic type, corners coming off the edge, like different things, different looks that, more or less confuse the offense. And, you got some chess pieces there, whether it's Tyke Smith or somebody that you can put in a blitz situation to bring extra guys to bring pressure. That's not the ideal way. The ideal way is to just rush 4 and get pressure because that gives you the numerical advantage you need on the back end. You got, 7 covering 5, right? And so that helps your coverage. But for whatever reason, they've been unable, and most of it is probably talent or the lack thereof, but they've been unable to marry up the coverage and the rush. And that's what it really takes. If your guys can create pressure on the quarterback, those defensive backs don't have to cover as long. They got their eyes on the quarterback. The ball's going to come out quicker, and they can jump routes. By the same token, if your defensive backs can blanket those receivers and that quarterback has to hold that football just a little bit longer, just a tick longer, then you can get to the quarterback and get them on the ground. So it really works together. I think one of the hardest things to do is to evaluate an edge rusher, a guy that you see in college that might be productive, and try to project him to the next level, to the NFL. There's probably as bigger of a bust rate in the first round for those guys as there are for quarterbacks, right? Which is probably right around or below 50%. No explanation. It's just it's a different position up here. You're going against grown ass men and very smart offensive coordinators that are just not going to let you take an outside rush and be a better athlete and get to the quarterback. So it takes a while to learn to play the position. I think Yaya Diaby has experienced that. I think he's grown in some ways every year, but he's sitting here with 5 sacks to lead the team. And so Jason Light has done a great job at certain positions, especially the offensive line and some others. He has not really had success finding that outside rusher in the draft. Now, free agency all day long. And so that's the second part of your question. I don't know what draft capital you would necessarily give up. I mean, if the draft were today, everybody and their grandmother is going to write that the Bucs' biggest need is an edge rusher, right? And you could have argued that was the case last year, but they got Emeka Ibuka. Or you could have said they needed an inside linebacker, which they still will need next year. So a lot of needs, but I don't know how much you trade in terms of draft capital. If it were me, I would be looking, maybe not for a Micah Parsons type deal, because that's going to set you back many, many drafts with respect to your first rounders. But I would definitely be looking for a Josh Sweat, or somebody that has done it that can get me 10 in this league. That's why Reddick is here. I mean, he thought he had it, hoped he had it with Hassan Reddick. He had been a guy that for 5 years had over 10 sacks a year, for the New York Jets. Or I'm sorry, for the Philadelphia Eagles, then got traded to the Jets, didn't report, sat out 6 or 7 weeks, and then ended up coming in there late. And everyone kind of said, well, maybe that's just a washout year. let's see if we can get him back to double digits. And, it sounded like a good plan. They paid him $14 million. He was a little ticked off that he wasn't getting his $30 million like everybody else. And he had the motivation to prove something, but then he got hurt, and he's been hurt. He's sitting here with 1.5 sacks. That's not what you wanted. That's not the production. That's not the, his inability to stay on the field. So, still got 6-7 games left. He can still prove it that he is that guy. But you didn't get that guy. So, to answer your question, I would be looking to make any deal I could for a guy who I know can still do it. Maybe not a 30-year-old, maybe a guy that's in his mid to late 20s. The Micah Parsons deal, those don't come along very often, but I'll say this. Micah Parsons is on pace to maybe set an NFL record for the single season. He could get 22 or more. And, that's the kind of production that you give up those first round picks for, right? Whether that puts the Packers over the top or not, we'll see. But there's just not many Micah Parsons out there, and I don't see Jason parting with those draft picks. But he absolutely should consider that and everything else and turn over every stone to find an edge rusher, because if you don't have one in this league, it's kind of like not having a quarterback on offense. Everybody's got to have that guy to help their defense go. You need game wreckers. And they need a lot next year. But that would be at the top of everybody's list. It's quarterback, and then who affects the quarterback the most, which is usually the edge rushers. Those are the two positions that make the most money, and that's the reason they do. So, yeah, it's a great question. And I would say, he definitely should go the free agent route. I would, before I would just try to find that needle in a haystack, which seems to be difficult in the first round even.
All right, Chuck in West Palm Beach tweeted. Says, I know Josh Grizzard was dealt a bad hand with the injuries, but the fact remains that he's still learning on the job. What is the possibility of getting a new offensive coordinator in the offseason? Grizzard was promoted due to continuity for Baker, but this offense deserves more.
Yeah, it's a tough job evaluation for Josh, because unlike Dave Canales and certainly unlike Liam Cohen, he's had to deal from day one, actually before day one, right? At the start of the season and in training camp, he's had to deal with injuries that those guys never dreamed of, right? Like, just imagine what would it look like if Mike Evans only missed 3 games instead of what he's going to miss, right? What would it look like if Chris Godwin, um, at least had the first 6, 7, 8 games where he was in the lineup? What would it look like if Bucky Irving started, or didn't start every game, but played every single game of the regular season? What would it look like if the offensive line, if you had 5 offensive linemen who were up every single week, and Cody Malk was here, and, you didn't have to shuffle it the way you had at the beginning of this season, and everybody was in their normal positions. Like, those are all things that you cannot ignore if you're trying to evaluate Josh Grizzard. The hand is the hand, right? And so for that reason, I'm not looking for a new offensive coordinator yet. Can it be better? Absolutely. Did he do some good things? Remember, this team was 5-1, right? They were 5-1 with wins at Seattle, right? They had to have some unbelievable last minute drives against Houston on the road. They beat the Jets in the last minute. They beat the 49ers, who are a really good team this year. They beat Atlanta in Atlanta at a time when, they were still looked like a contender. So I'm just not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think Josh has potential. I just think that he's been dealt the toughest hand, and we won't really know kind of what kind of play caller, what kind of offensive coordinator he can be, because it's about players, not plays. It always has been in this league, and he just hasn't had the continuity. He's had to have a different game plan every week based on who was available. And when your top players, when Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Bucky Irving, Tristan Wirfs, Ben Bredesen, Cody Mauk, like all these guys are not available, it's not going to look as good. Just isn't, and it hasn't. And so I'd be willing to see what he can do these last few weeks, especially as they get pieces back, right? You didn't mention Jalen McMillan, right? And see if it doesn't look a little better. But I think continuity was the strength that you had with Baker Mayfield, at least the same system. And I would think it would be a strength next year if you kept Josh. So I don't expect to see a new offensive coordinator here unless Josh were to get a head coaching job, which seems far fetched now. But let's see what he can do these final 6 weeks. I really don't think this is on the now. Is he perfect? No, it's his first year calling plays in the NFL, for God's sakes, or anywhere for that matter. But I listen to the players, and I trust Baker, who's had his own opinions about both Dave Canales and Liam Cohen, and I trust Baker that he knows what it sounds and looks like when it's good, and he's pretty fervently in Grizzard's corner. So that's good enough for me for now. Hey, got a couple more mailbag questions for you as we finish up this week. But first, get on down to Breitling Boutique. It is officially, ladies and gentlemen, Black Friday, your Christmas season. So if you don't have the tree or the lights up, get that done. But mostly, get on down to Breitling Boutique. That's where you're going to find it, the second floor of the mall, center of the mall. And I was there the other day, and you know what I saw in the window? A couple of NFL watches. These are the beautiful Chronomount watches. They're celebrating the NFL's 104th year anniversary while supplies last. A different watch for all 32 teams. And they had I think it was the Bucs and the Jaguars watches were on display. Beautiful Chronomount watches with the color of the team on the face of the watch as well as the logos. Man, you have to see these. You will absolutely want them. They are affordable. But this is a timepiece that you will own and cherish for many, many years or generations to come. They also have the men's watches, as we mentioned, the Chronomats, the Navitimers, women's watches for your wife, your girlfriend. It is the Christmas season. Go buy her one. These are sports watches. If she's on the go like my wife and banging around, these will hold up. They're durable. They're beautiful. And she can choose from just a ton of different colored wristbands to boot. Great customer service. Spend some time in there. They'll pour you a drink, learn about their beautiful watches. It is Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. When you go, we just ask you one thing. Let them know that you heard about it right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. All right, let's continue with a few questions to end the week.
Okay, Sean in Georgia had emailed you. He says, "Hi, Rick. While I agree with the mantra of sports being about players, not plays, I do think it's time to question the Bucs coaching staff. I recall your training camp analysis about the Bucs running longer routes under Josh Grizzard. These plays worked early on, but then came injuries, or then came the opponents having film on this play calling tendencies. The O-line clearly can't block long enough for these routes to develop. Baker's getting crushed and the receivers just aren't getting open. Why isn't he making changes? In addition, Bowles' defense is getting shredded weekly. No pressure, yet wide open receivers. Oh, and continuing to kick the ball to the Buffalo kick returner instead of blasting it through the end zone was asinine. Just feels like the staff isn't putting the players in prime position to thrive. To quote the great John McKay, seems fitting, quote, "We didn't block, but we made up for it by not tackling." Perhaps those first 5 victories were luck. The team is just minutes away from being 1-10 this season. Happy Thanksgiving to you both.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you as well, Sean. I think you hit all the salient points, and these are all things that have to be evaluated at the end of the season. We don't have the total picture, but we're running out of runway here. This thing's either going to take off or to continue the analogy, end up in a pile someplace. And so, I think it is fair to question the coaching staff, and I think it's very fair to question some of Bowles' hires on that coaching staff starting. And I like the guy. This is not personal, but he knows this is a business. But Thomas McGahee has had an awful year with the special teams, right? It started with all kinds of kick blocks, field goals. Of course, you had some misses in there too, but block kicks, block punts. Riley Dixon has, I don't think, had a good year or done a good job necessarily, or the job they hoped he would do. He's had a kick block. He's been slow. The other night too, it's like, they come out against the Rams, and I think when this season is over, I think Bowles needs to look at himself and say, maybe I need to be more aggressive, especially on defense. And defensive coaches tend to trust their defense and think that that's the way to go. But this defense has not been good this year. And, they started that game against the Rams. They get to the plus 42, 43-yard line. And, yeah, it's 4th and 6 or 7. It's a long pickup as far as that goes. And the percentages are probably 10% or less maybe in those situations. But I think you have to be aggressive, and especially knowing that your defense isn't very good this year and your special teams. And so what do? They trust the special teams, right, to pin them deep on the road at SoFi when you need momentum, when you need to come out and get the Rams down a little bit. You punt the ball after the first possession, after you've moved it into their territory, and you punt it 25 yards, 25 freaking yards. And, that's the sort of thing. You got to play complementary football. The defense has to help with the offense with field positions, with turnovers. Your special teams needs to dictate field position as well. And they've not done any of that very well. So he's got to look at his staff, number one. He's got to look at himself and continue to determine whether or not he's the best play caller for this defense. But I still think, and I know you quoted me correctly, I still think it is about players and not plays. They've got to find edge rushers. Like, they don't have certain things you need in this league to win consistently, right? And as far as lucking into the 5-1 start, I think there was some luck involved, no question. But I also think a lot of it was the quarterback put this team on his back. When you're losing in Houston and it's 4th and 10 and you run for 15 yards, or, you pick up the 4th and 10 by running the football. When you do that time and time again, like the San Francisco game where it was third and 17 or whatever it was, like, you've seen Baker Mayfield carry this team and will his team in these 2-minute drives. Their first 4 victories came in the final minute. That never happens. Okay. So is luck involved? Absolutely. But then again, there was poise involved as well, right? There was execution. There was doing the little things. They didn't hurt themselves with penalties. They didn't miss blocks. They didn't make bad throws. Like, they did all the things you need to do to win the game. And their execution, got away from them, I think, as they had more and more and more injuries as the season went along. So there's no way you can really evaluate this without considering who you're playing with, or in this case, who you're not playing with. But there'll be the hard questions have to be asked, win or lose, after this season. Look, if they win the division, it's hard. It's hard to make sweeping changes when you've won the NFC South. It'll be going on 4 years in a row or 5 years in a row and made the playoffs 6 straight times. Like, those are hard decisions to make. But by the same token, you're not in it just to win the playoffs. And this is a bad division, and it's been a bad division that you've been winning every year. I'd rather win it than lose it and not make the playoffs. But, if you can't advance, if you can't win a playoff game or two, you're not going to make it to the Super Bowl. So at some point, and I don't know that we're there yet, the Glazers have just signed Bulls this year to a contract extension, but that's okay. They've done that before with John Gruden and Bruce Allen and fired them after one season. The Glazers will have to decide, is this the coach? Is this the head coach? Is this the staff that can get us to a Super Bowl? Because that's what they're interested in. They're not happy enough with just winning the NFC South. Trust me. So I don't know that we're there yet, but all those big decisions and all those conversations happen at the end of the season, and it's really hard to speculate. Because what if I told you they're going to win 6 in a row? Would that be that far-fetched with the teams they have on their schedule? No, it really wouldn't. Now, you got to play better, but if they end up with 12 wins and a 3rd seed, in the NFC and win a playoff game, now all of a sudden it looks different. So we still don't know the rest of the story. But if it goes south, or the way it's been going, or it continues to head that way, yeah, I think all those are fair questions, man. I think changes, at minimum, there'll be changes to the coaching staff, and there would need to be. And if there weren't, and this is how it goes, you get the coach in there, right, after the season, and you take a breath, you take a day or 2 or 3, and he's got to come in and face the Glazers, and he better have the answers, right? Because the questions aren't going to, they're going to be tough questions no matter what happens, unless the season ends in the Super Bowl. And he better know how to fix it and have a plan on how to fix it and who he's going to get and what's going to happen. And if they don't buy that plan, I've seen it. I've seen it with Lovie Smith, right? Dirk Cutter was sort of fait accompli. We knew he was fired based on the record. They don't get the answers they like. If they don't think it's a good plan, they'll make a change. And it seems like, how can you make a change with a guy that's won 3 straight NFC South titles and been part of 4 in a row and won a Super Bowl as a defensive coordinator? Well, they got rid of Tony Dungy. Now the difference is Dungy built it, right? He came here. This was a train wreck, and they had 12 losing seasons in a row. So there was a little more, loyalty and appreciation for what Tony did. Maybe even more so than Bulls. But they still fired Tony Dungy, who's a Hall of Fame coach, right? So nobody is safe in the NFL. That's just the nature of the game, nature of the business. You have to win, and not just win, but when you win, you create expectations that you need to win a Super Bowl, or you need to get in deeper into playoffs. So you want to see improvement each year, because those windows aren't open forever, and so I think there will be hard questions asked about the coaching staff, about Todd Bowles, but we don't have the answers yet. We don't know what this looks like until we play these final 6 games.
All right, Mark wrote an email to you in a blizzard in Wisconsin. He says, Jason Light has been getting a lot of national attention in the media. I've personally heard his praise on Bill Simmons, Colin Cowherd, and Pro Football Focus podcast. He is a top 5 GM in the league and deserves all the accolades. My question is, despite his incredible drafts, are the Bucs stuck as a 9 to 10 win playoff team because Jason can't find top-tier defensive ends? He has no issue drafting elite defensive tackles.
I mean, he needs to do better in that area. I think it's hard for any team to find elite defensive ends. There's only so many on the planet. I mean, it's a little like quarterbacks, right? You either have one or you don't. If you have one, you have a chance. And if you don't, the rest of the NFL is all in the same boat. They're all looking for one. And when it comes to outside pass rushers, edge rushers, that is not the position that Jason has really ever hit on in the draft. Now, do we know what Yaya Diaby is going to be for the rest of his career? We don't. I mean, he's got 5 sacks now. Could he get 5 in the last, 6 weeks and finish with double digits to be the first guy since Shaq Barrett to do it? Maybe. Maybe we have a different opinion of him. But the fact is that Jason hasn't done very well at that position, and whether you're talking about Joe Tryon, Shawenka, or any of them before that, he's gotten his most production from free agents, and the trade of Jason Pierre-Paul, the signing of Shaq Barrett, which was unbelievable. You took a guy that was the 5th pass rusher on the Denver Broncos. He came in here for 1 year, $4 million, and he led the NFL with 19 and a half sacks. That's lightning in a bottle. You franchised him a couple of times. You signed him to a long-term deal, and he's the best pass rusher that Jason Light has ever had. And so I think it's on him to go into free agency and prove that if you can't draft him, you gotta steal one in free agency. You gotta overpay for one, whatever it takes. But that is a hole when it comes to his drafting. Now, I do think he's one of the best GMs in the NFL. I do think he's top 5. And if they come out of this somehow and get on a heater here and win this division and go deep in the playoffs, he should be considered for General Manager of the Year, which is been kind of Howie Roseman's domain of late. But he didn't do anything and hasn't done anything at the trading deadline at any point in his career, right? Just not a big believer in that. He really values draft picks. He hoards them, quite frankly. But then again, most of his draft picks, or a large percentage of them, make the 53-man roster, which does not happen in a lot of places. Maybe they're biased towards their own guys. Maybe their guys are just better than everybody else. When you come up with a Tez Johnson in the 7th round, and he's sitting here with 5 touchdown catches and had to be pressed into service, like his first 7th rounder to do that since Marcus Colston with the Saints. Like, those are the kinds of things you go, well, it's a pretty good GM now. right? It's pretty good. Yeah, Emeka Ibuka, like everybody's screaming, and maybe they should have gotten an inside linebacker or an edge rusher if there was one available. But they went ahead and got Emeka Ibuka with the age that Mike Evans had. Where would they be without him, by the way, with the injuries they had to Godwin and Evans? So, yeah, he hasn't hit on, you know what? A lot of teams haven't. And a lot of teams haven't gone from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. He gets credit for that too, right? So you can't have everything. You're not going to get everything every year. It's one of those positions like quarterback that's hard to identify. But if you're going to tell me, that's a kind of a negative on his career, no one could disagree with you. I think he would agree with you. He's got to do a better job. He's got to address that position, and figure out if that alone or something like that will help get them over the hump. Because what happens is you become a victim of your own success. You win 9 or 10 games every year, you win the division every year, you get in the playoffs every year, but if you don't get to the Super Bowl, after a while people go, well, we need somebody who can get us over the hump, and that's kind of where they're nearing right now. But listen, he's a top 5 GM. You don't fire those guys, but you do hope that they figure it out and get better.
All right, Billy had sent a note in. He says, I've been hearing about Ronde Barber and hearing him criticize the awful defense on his WFLA show. Obviously, Ronde has an abundance of football knowledge from his very long NFL career. Could you ever see Ronde Barber becoming a coach somewhere in the NFL or at the college level?
I mean, I think he could do it. There's no question in my mind he could do it. I don't see him doing that because the hours that are involved with it. Ronde has a lot of interest in his life. Some of them social, some of them personal, like family. He's got some children and a wife, and I think the guys that grow up in the game the way he has, they recognize the number of hours and sacrifice that those coaches make, whether you're a head coach or anything else. So I haven't asked him specifically about coaching. He has an incredible bit of knowledge. I mean, look, you look at Ronde Barber and what he accomplished to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Here's a guy that was a really good player in college in Virginia. Of course, his twin brother Tiki, great running back with the Giants. But he was sort of the lesser Barber when they came out in the NFL. And I still say this, for people that, you think about the Benjamin Morrisons and some of the mistakes they've made as rookies and some of these young corners. Ronde Barber did not play as a rookie, did not play, right? Could not get on the field. Herm Edwards would not play him because he wasn't ready. And yet he made the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So he knows what it looks like. And he gets ball. He's as, as astute when it comes to, kind of a scholar of the game, understanding offense and defense. He would be a tremendous head coach because he can also relate to players. He's a great communicator, not a good one, but a great one. And not for nothing, but that dude had more swag in his 5'10" and a half, 5'11" body than I've ever seen. If you ask me, of all the players you covered, I mean, that's a lot of them, right? Sapp, Brooks, Lynch, all those guys had that special sauce, right? You don't make it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame without it. But pound for pound, right? A guy no bigger than him that could dominate the game at different levels the way he could, whether it was rushing the passer, intercepting passes, coming down and making tackles at his size. He'd be hard pressed to find a player who had more swag in his game and more production than Ronde Barber did. So he knows what it looks like. I haven't talked to him. I don't think coaching is in his future. He's done the broadcasting thing. I think this, however, and I do believe this, John Lynch has proven to be a pretty good GM with the 49ers. Now, they got to finish the deal and win one of those Super Bowls one day. But I think that Ronde Barber would be incredibly capable of putting together a team if he got that opportunity. And maybe college is in his future, maybe as a guy running a program and not coaching. But I don't see that in his future for whatever reason at coaching. And I haven't talked to him about it. But if you're asking me if he could be an asset to any NFL or college program, it'd be yes, 100 times yes. I mean, who wouldn't want Ronde Barber, helping them evaluate stuff. And his podcast is really, really good. And the stuff he's able to break down, his critiques are spot on. So he was always a big film guy too. Like you can tell, right, when you listen to his breakdowns and his critiques. Ronde, his secret sauce was studying. He played with anticipation because of what he did Monday through Saturday. He had the answers to the test, and then he went out there on the field, and when he saw something, he jumped it. He trusted his preparation, and he went out there and he executed. So, yeah, he's great at that, and I think he'd be successful whatever he does.
We'll wrap up on this one, and really we talked about this yesterday on the podcast, but Allie in the UK had asked, as we approach the quarter mark of the Lightning season, how is this season's team shaping up compared to last season, and how far can they go?
Well, you said it yesterday, Steve. I mean, I think the depth on this team, especially those last couple lines, what they've been able to do defensively in particular, with the number of defensemen that they have out right now, that's what's encouraging about this team. I mean, the way they're playing, it starts with Vasilevsky, obviously, who's playing now at a high level, but the guys around him have been terrific. And I mean, this Lightning team to come out, they didn't start fast to say the least, but to get on this heater like they're on right now, this is. And this is not going to, barring more injuries, this is not going to stop. They have the depth now. Through all those lines, they're going to be a force throughout the year, I think.
Well, and they're committed to playing team defense.
Yeah,
and that's what for years was kind of missing after the 3 cup runs, the 2 wins, and then losing to Colorado. They kind of lost their way for a couple of years defensively. Last year, they were better, much better with it. With amazing Ryan McDonough came back and it changed. But this year, they're even more, and it's a team effort. It's not just the defensemen. Team wise, they're just more committed. You look at the number of shots the other teams are getting on them. It's relatively low. Some of the numbers the last few games have been skewed a little bit higher only because in the third period when the team's down 4 goals, they're just shooting at everything. So the numbers go up a little bit. But I still say, and I've said it before the season started, this is the most talented Lightning team in 5 seasons. Now, whether, and they're doing this too with all these injuries, but also Braden Point, when he's played, he hasn't perform much. I mean, he's got 11 points, I think, in 21 games. That is not Braden Point like at all. And now he's out hurt. So, if he gets going and, Hagel's having a fantastic year, Kuch is starting to heat up now. Like, and if they keep playing team defense, this team, I think Colorado is the best team in the NHL. And the Lightning are in that next tier. Like,
is the defense good enough to beat Florida? Because that's what it's going to come down to.
If you can, the way they're playing now, I think so.
Yeah.
Although playoff hockey's different, etc.
Sure.
And injuries and everything else happen. But if they can play this way in the playoffs and take it up a notch, because everybody does in the playoffs, but if they stay this committed to the defensive end of the ice, yeah. I mean, that's how they won cups. That's how they won the back-to-back cups.
Yeah.
It wasn't what they scored. It was what they kept out of their net or kept away from their net. That's how you win. Offense wins games. Defense wins championships.
Well, and those Stanley Cup years, I mean, they would get up on you. If they were up on you by 2 goals, it was over. If they were up by you by 1 and a third, it was probably over.
Even in the 1-4-2 start, which was, bad for the Lightning, and they were last place in the Eastern Conference, 6 of those 7 games were 1-goal games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't like they were getting blown out.
No.
They weren't playing their best hockey, and definitely offensively they were struggling too. But it wasn't like they got blown out, and the 4 losses, and then of course the 2 overtime losses are 1-goal games. But they were. There's only been 2, maybe 3 games you went, oh, that wasn't a very good effort defensively this year. The rest they've been playing well, and a lot like last year, but they're better this year, and this is even with right now 4 of their top 6 defensemen out. And still doing it. So, it's a long season. We're only, just past the quarter mark, 23 games out of 82. So, and the Lightning will have a back-to-back now on the road. Today at noon against the Red Wings, tomorrow at 2 p.m. against the Rangers.
Yeah, they got to go on the road now. They got a little streak here.
7 of the next 9 on the road starting today. So,
yeah. But I'll say this, like in any sport, if you get a team that jumps out like that, and you see how they're winning with defense,
Mm-hmm.
that usually is a good sign for the rest of the season. Because it travel defense will travel, and you're not just going to be prone to winning at home and not on the road. So yeah, man, you still have the world's greatest goaltender. And if you play around him that way, because he's the biggest part of your defense, obviously. But if you can play like that around him, goodness, keep it out of your zone, all that stuff.
The other thing is we're at American Thanksgiving, which there's an old adage in hockey, and it holds actually true. If you're out of a playoff spot at American Thanksgiving, it's hard to get in the playoffs. Like last year, I think 4 teams did, and they were all within like 3 points of the playoff cut line at American Thanksgiving. It's kind of weird how that works out that way. It's about the quarter mark of the season. If the playoffs started today in hockey, you know how many Canadian teams would be in the playoffs?
I do not.
1.
Jeez.
Ottawa.
Wow.
Not Edmonton, not Toronto. Toronto's in last, or no, Toronto just passed Buffalo for last place in the Eastern Conference. But yes, Ottawa would be the only Canadian team in the playoffs if the playoffs started today.
Whoa, Canada. Yeah, that's tough. The All-American Stanley Cup Finals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, a Canadian team hasn't won it since 1993.
Well, there's that. Yeah, true. Not like there's not a streak going already.
Yeah.
No, look, this Lightning team is good, and I'm facing a lot of pressure to go see them, but for the life of me, I know if I do, they're going to lose. That's how we started this, and I'm fully aware of it. I will let John Cooper know. He can rest his starters if I happen to come down there, but I do want to see him play, and that's going to happen one way or the other. So, hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Go see our friends at Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. Check out the beautiful watches they have for men and women. The NFL 104th year anniversary watches, all 32 teams represented while supplies last. It's Breitling Boutique. Get on down there and start your Christmas shopping for your wife, your girlfriend, yourself, and do it now. Thanks for listening. As always, everybody, we look forward to seeing what happens over the weekend in college football with Lane Kiffin. And, of course, the Bucs and Cardinals on Sunday. We will talk to you on Monday. For Steve Versnick, I'm Rick Stroud, Tampa Bay Times. Have a great weekend, everybody.